Okay. My name is Jennifer Welch, W-E-L-C-H.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Welch, you are the crime scene investigator that testified about arriving at Suburban Drive on December 11th and beginning the photography process, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell the members of the jury how long the Orange County Sheriff's Office crime scene personnel, as well as FBI evidence response team and other agency members, were at the scene on Suburban prior to its being released?
Yes. With it beginning on December 11th to the last day, we were there a total of 10 days.
Now, during that 10 days, it was your responsibility to photograph things as they were discovered or collected, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, how many people, just an estimate, how many people do you believe were there assisting?
I would say 50 or over. I'm not sure of the number.
Now, in order to try to document the collection process, what did you all set up out on Suburban Drive?
In order to document the process, we began with setting up a baseline. From the baseline, we then set up search lanes. And then later, during the period of being out there, we set up wooden stakes that helped to serve as a grid.
And as items were found within that grid or on the search lanes, would that item be flagged and then photographed by you prior to its collection?
Yes.
Can you tell the members of the jury a little bit more about the environment where this was taking place? We saw the initial photographs of the wall of vegetation. Once you got past that, was that an open clearing? How would you describe it?
I would describe it as an area of dense vegetation. There were the hanging vines, there were trees, there were palmetto trunks. As we began searching and clearing the scene of the leaf litter, getting down into the actual surface, there was roots, and then going deeper, there were larger roots.
All right. Is this a situation where it's actually difficult to walk on the surface because of all of the roots of various sizes?
Yes, initially with the large amount of vegetation, it was difficult to walk around. As we began to clear and we started coming across the large trunks and large roots, then yes, it was still difficult.
Okay. Now, in order to assist in clearing the area, you all normally are provided with certain instruments. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. If I may show the witness what's introduced as 201 in evidence, Your Honor.
You may.
And since it's in evidence, may I publish during the testimony?
You may.
Do you see 201?
Yes, I do.
What are these items that are shown in this photograph?
It appears to be on the far left a machete, and then to the right, when viewing the photo, it looks to be sheaths.
The sheath for the machete?
Yes, the cover for the machete.
All right. Are those standard issued items for crime scene investigators with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, machete with the sheath is issued to crime scene investigators.
All right. When you were documenting this scene, was that something that was at the scene when you got there, or do these items belong to somebody with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
These items may belong to someone at the Orange County Sheriff's Office because while out on the scene, I don't recall seeing a machete already out on scene.
If I may have GX for identification. Ma'am, can you see GX for identification in front of you?
Yes, I can.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the surface of the scene after some clearing?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce GX for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence the state's numbered.
273.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may publish.
Can you describe what we are seeing here for the members of the jury?
Yes, this is a photograph showing palmetto trunks that we were able to see after searching and doing some clearing. And in this photograph is also an evidence flag indicating an item of evidence.
Now, how much clearing has been done prior to when you took this photograph?
We would have cleared to the west of the baseline that we had set up, and this photograph is representing approximately clearing from the surface of 0 to 4 inches.
If I may have GY for identification. Do you see GY? Tell me when you do.
Yes, now I do.
All right. That evidence flag that we saw in GX, does that appear in GY?
Yes, it does.
All right. And what is it that that evidence flag is denoting?
The evidence flag is being utilized to indicate a bone that was located on scene.
All right. Can you annotate the screen with the location of this bone?
Yes.
Did you draw the attention of Dr. Schultz at some point to this bone?
I don't recall if I did or if the person who located had.
Did you ultimately collect that bone?
Yes, I did.
Did you endeavor to make some measurement of how far into the dirt or the surface that bone resided was?
Yes.
Okay. May I publish this?
You may.
Wait, is this a fair and accurate photograph of that
Yes,
you were
it
trying
is.
to depict? Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce GY for identification into evidence and seek permission to publish.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence the state's numbered.
274.
You may publish.
Thank you. Right. If I may have HA for identification. I'm sorry, HB. Ma'am, can you see HB?
Yes, I do.
Is that a photograph of the depth at which this item was found?
Yes, it is.
Right. Is that a fair and accurate representation of that depth?
Yes, it is.
Right. Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce HB for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence the state's numbered.
275.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Right. And if I may have HF for identification. You collected that item, you said?
Yes, I did.
All right. Do you see HF on your screen?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of the item that you collected from that location?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce HF for identification into evidence.
Be received evidence and states numbered.
276.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
In addition to photography, were you responsible for the documentation and collection of other items of evidence at the scene?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect how many different items were documented and collected?
Yes. Actually, on the scene of Suburban Drive, I collected over 390 pieces of evidence.
All right. Did the majority of that consist of bottles and other types of trash?
Yes, it did.
All right. Does that number include pieces of black plastic bag that were scattered about the scene?
Yes, it does.
Did you collect a piece of duct tape that
Yes,
was at the scene?
Sorry, yes, I did.
Okay. Where was that in relationship to the main site where the skull was recovered?
That piece of duct tape was located near the area where the skull was collected to the southwest.
If I may have LB for identification.
You may.
Let me show you what's been marked as LB for identification, as I indicated. Tell me if this is something that you recognize that you've had contact with in the past.
Yes, I recognize.
How do you recognize it?
I recognize it by the label, and I recognize it by my initials on the evidence tape.
Is there an item inside the package that you recognize as well?
Yes, I do.
All right, and what do you recognize it to be?
I recognize it to be a piece of duct tape that was collected on the scene.
All right, Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce LB for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence and states numbered.
277.
And may we publish this item to the jury?
You may publish.
Okay, can you extract that from the bag and show the members of the jury? Are there markings on that piece of duct tape?
Yes, there are.
And what do they say?
The imprintations on the duct tape say,
Yes, just a second. You may proceed, ma'am.
the imprintations on the duct tape say Hinkle Consumer Adhesives, Avon, Ohio, 4401, max temp 200 degrees F, and that's all I can read.
Go ahead and return that. Did you also collect on the scene plastic pink strips with words?
Yes, I did.
If I may have LC for identification?
You may.
Have you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize the packaging as something you've had contact with in the past?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
I recognize this by my initials on the evidence tape, and I recognize this as I had placed in this in this brown paper bag, pink wording strip of packages and in.
There is another item inside the exterior packaging. Do you recognize that?
I don't recognize the brown paper bag.
All right, let me. Tell me if you recognize what's contained within the bag.
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those items to be?
I recognize them to be lettering that I had collected out on the scene.
You can hold that up here and let me see the exterior package. Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce LC for identification into evidence.
Be received in evidence as states numbered
278.
Your Honor, may the witness publish the items in the package to the jury?
She may. Can't see it. It may be helpful if you put the document camera up and then have them placed on the document camera.
Yes, Your Honor. I may need a piece of paper.
You may want to zoom in a little bit. Okay.
Are those the pink plastic word items that you recovered from the scene?
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Your Honor, I have no further questions of the witness.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Ms. Welch.
Good morning.
Can I? May I publish what's in evidence as 201, Your Honor?
States Exhibit 201, you may publish.
Do you see that, Ms. Welch?
Yes, I do.
Do the ladies and gentlemen of the jury see that? Okay. This is a photograph of the street, correct?
It's a photograph of wooded area with a section of the street. That's correct.
Sorry. How far from the edge of the street to the first area where the weed line begins would you say that is?
I don't know. You would have to ask Supervisor Murdoch with the diagram.
Okay. Did you document in your report how far that is?
No, I did not.
Okay. Do you recall approximately, and I'm not asking for an exact figure, but how many feet from the edge of the cement before you get into the woods?
Before I get into the woods or to the grass line?
To the, I guess, the weed area where there's more vegetation.
I would have to guess 10 feet,
Okay. And
possibly.
how far from the cement to where the skull was found, how far from the street, from the cement, was the skull found?
I would have to refer to a report that I brought with me, another CSI wrote up.
Please go ahead and refer to the report.
Okay. According to the report written by the other CSI who took the measurements, the skull was approximately 19 feet, 8 inches from south of Suburban Drive.
So, Your Honor, may I have the witness stand down to measure, to demonstrate for the jury how far that is?
You may.
Can you please step down and use the edge of this brass area so all the members of the jury can see that. Now, you testified up to the main area was 10 feet, correct?
That was a guess.
Guessing. Okay. So if you were standing or walking on the grassy area, this is how far away you would be from the skull?
For what you had asked about the actual vegetation, then yes.
Can everyone see that? You can take.
Viewers don't see.
Now, the piece of duct tape that was just introduced into evidence, and I'm referring to State's Evidence 277. Where was this item found?
That piece of duct tape, again, was to the southwest of the area from which the skull was collected.
Okay. How far away?
I don't know. You would have to ask Mr. Murdoch with the diagram.
Okay. Do you have any reports or indication as to was it in Area A?
No, it was not.
Okay. So is it your understanding that it was approximately 10 feet away?
I don't know. You would have to ask Mr. Murdoch.
Okay. But it certainly wasn't in the area where the bag and the skull was found.
That's correct.
And that duct tape appears to be the same make of, or the same kind of duct tape with the same insignia as the one found near the skull.
It had the same imprintations. That's correct.
No further questions.
Redirect?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
One more question. May I publish GY, which is state's evidence? 274, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Can you see that, Ms. Welsh?
Yes, I can.
Can the ladies and gentlemen of the jury see? Okay. These items here that I'm pointing, these items that I'm pointing out, do you know what they are?
Yes, they are stones.
Okay. And were they found throughout the area where the remains were found?
Yes, they were.
In fact, there were some that were very close to the remains, were there not?
I recall one that was close to the remains.
And they are like stone pavers?
I don't know what type of stone, but yes, it could be consistent with pavers.
Okay. I have no further questions, Judge.
Redirect, I'm sorry.
No redirect.
Okay. Midway.
It's Ronald Murdoch, M-U-R-D-O-C-K.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Please tell the members of the jury your occupation.
I'm a forensic supervisor with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked for the Orange County Sheriff?
I've worked for the Sheriff's Office for approximately 11 and a half years.
As a forensic supervisor, what are your regular duties or obligations?
As a supervisor, I go to major crimes such as homicides or officer-involved shootings to act as a supervisor to ensure that all the work that needs to get done gets done, and also administrative duties as far as reviewing reports, other administrative payroll, that type of stuff. But I also take call and work calls myself.
Did you have any supervisory responsibility over the scene on Suburban Drive beginning December 11th of 2008, where the recovery of Caylee Marie Anthony's remains was ongoing?
I didn't respond on the 11th, but I did respond to that scene on the 12th.
Okay.
And would you like me to expand on what my duties were there? Okay.
Exactly. What was it that you were responsible for at that scene?
I was assisting the other supervisor within our unit, but I assisted with clearing debris like vegetation, trees from the area, getting supplies that were needed. Primarily, my duties was diagramming that scene and all the evidence that was located within it.
Did you utilize any particular programs to assist you in documenting or diagramming the scene?
Yes, I used what we call a total station, which is similar to what you see surveyors use on the side of the road when they have it up on a tripod. We'll use that to create a two-dimensional or a bird's eye view diagram of that scene. So we use that total station. It gathers all the evidence, the points or the measurements of the location of those items, and then we put it into a software to create an actual diagram.
Where are you getting the information that you ultimately put into the total station program?
I'm I got the information from the evidence that was marked by crime scene investigator Jennifer Welch. So when she would mark an item, then I would come in and take the measurements from that item, and then that was the information that I got. And then also placing items such as just the roadway, lights, just other auxiliary stuff that she may not have marked, but as far as evidence, that was strictly what she marked.
Would that have included documenting the location where, say, each bone that was first flagged and then recovered was located?
Yes.
Did you group those bones once you placed the information from the measurements into the total station into various areas?
Yes. When we looked at the amount of bones that were located, and some of them were so close that they're very densely populated, so it would be very hard on a diagram to see them in separate locations. So I met with Dr. John Schultz at UCF, and it was determined to go ahead and circle areas where there was a lot of bones together. That way it would be easier to see, the distribution of the bones, but then place within the report what bones were in that circled area.
Did you also mark other evidence items? For example, we saw a piece of duct tape that was recovered away from some of the bones.
Yes.
Why don't we just wait for a few minutes till the train passes by?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The total station program, is that one that is available to you on your laptop?
Yes.
Okay. Did you bring that with you?
Yes, it did.
The program that you utilized enables you to print out some of the screens, the various screens that you can go through as you testify, correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this point, if I could show the witness QJ and QK for identification.
You may.
Do you recognize those items?
Yes, I do.
Okay, the first item marked QK.
Yes.
What is that?
It's a diagram of the scene. It has the circled area, but it also has all of the bones shown that were in those circled areas, as well as the roadway, the light posts, brush line, base line, and duct tape.
Right. Now, even though it shows all of the bones collected, is there such density of the bones within the area that you cannot make out each individual marking for a bone?
That's correct.
Okay. The other item that I handed you, is that QJ?
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
It's very similar to the first one that we just discussed. However, the actual location of the bones are removed, so it's just the circled areas.
Do those two diagrams fairly and accurately represent screens of the total station program that you have available to you on your laptop?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce QK and QJ for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
I apologize, Mr. Rain-Burdick. I just see one diagram on my screen.
You may.
I have no objection.
They will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Today will come state exhibit number 279,
Your Honor, may the witness publish those items from his laptop that is hooked to the monitor?
Any objections from the defense?
No, sir, no objections.
He may publish from his laptop those two exhibits.
All right, let's start with the first that you had described, QJ, correct? Which is 279 in evidence. And let me,
But that's the ones with the bones located within the diagram.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Can you, first of all, explain to the members of the jury what they are looking at?
Okay, we're looking at basically an overview of the scene. You can see the roadway here of Suburban Drive, and then within here is the location of the bones. And you can see the red circles are the circled areas, and then all the black marks within there are representing the individual bones.
Is there any way to zoom into the specific location marked with the red circles?
Yes.
All right. Explain that again, if you will.
Okay. So again, these are the circled areas representing the areas where bones were found. And as you can see, some of them are very densely populated, meaning there's a lot of bones within those locations. Specifically, if you look at like areas A, H, and I, there's a lot of bones within there, almost to where it looks like an ink blot. So that's why those areas were circled. So the circled areas in red represent that grouping of those bones.
If you zoom into area A specifically, can you see any of those markings?
Yeah, so you can make out a few of them, but not very many. I mean, really, the only one we can really see here is bone 3, 26. And the skull would also be one of those dots there too.
Okay.
Because we can see the letter S, but other than that, I'd refer to my report.
You'd have to refer to your report to tell
Yes.
us exactly which bone is where.
Which bone was in which circled area, yes.
All right. If we could just go back out to the unzoomed. Did the system that you utilized enable you to give us the distance from the edge of Suburban Drive to area A?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the members of the jury what that distance is?
It's approximately 19 feet from the edge of Suburban Drive to the center of that area A. I can actually demonstrate it if you would like.
On the,
Yes.
go ahead, with the court's permission.
Right.
First, I'll zoom in. So, to the center, roughly 18.8 or 19 feet.
All right. Now, your screen displayed 19.0, I believe.
Yes,
What is that representative of?
19 feet.
From what point to what
Oh,
point were you
I'm sorry.
utilizing?
From that point there, which is the south edge of Suburban Drive, so the roadway.
Now, you have another line prior to getting to area A. What is that line representative of?
Kind of represented the brush line or the area that's kind of maintained by the county where they'll cut the grass and just kind of keep that clear. So that area from that line to the roadway is representing that clear area, and everything else was just kind of free to grow.
All right. And what would the measurement be between the edge of the roadway and the brush line or the tree line?
Okay, let's see here. So approximately 4.9, well, 4.9 or 5 feet, so approximately 5 feet.
All right, if we could publish the other screen, which is now 280 in evidence. Let me clear some of these annotations. And if you could just zoom into these red circled areas with the one black marking. You have a letter and number D1 indicated in black near area A. Do you know what that is representative of?
Yeah, that represents duct tape. That was the code that I gave for any duct tape that was found in the scene was a D. If I can look at my report, I can tell you specifically what that duct tape was.
Your Honor, may he refresh his recollection as to what D1 was?
You may.
Okay, D1 refers to a piece of duct tape with the brand name Hinkle Consumer Adhesives.
Now, you have two other D markings over to the right, D2, D3. Is
Yes.
that duct tape also?
Yes.
Did that have any marking on it to your recollection?
No.
Did you supply photographs and measurements to a surveying company, Allen and Company?
Yes, it did.
Were the photographs supplied and the measurements fair and accurate representations of the scene as you documented it using your total station equipment?
Yes.
We can unpublish this item. In addition to your responsibilities at the scene on Suburban, did you participate in a search warrant at the Anthony residence on December 11th of 2008?
Yes, it did.
Were you the individual who was responsible for collecting items of evidence located at that residence?
Yes, I was.
If I may have AY for identification. Sorry.
It's okay.
Do you see what I'm showing you marked as AY for identification?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize what is depicted through the use of photography?
Yes.
Was this a photograph taken in the evening hours of December 11th of 2008 at the Anthony residence?
Yes.
Does that photograph fairly and accurately depict the condition or the items enclosed within one of the sheds on their property?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce AY for identification into evidence as the state's next numbered exhibit.
No objections.
Be received in evidence the state's numbered.
281.
And permission to publish?
You may publish.
May I unpublish at this time?
You may. Members, you had a chance to look at it? Okay, thank you.
If I may have AZ for identification. Investigator Murdoch, do you recognize what is shown through the use of photography and AZ for identification?
Yes.
Is that the interior of another shed located on the Anthony property as it existed on December 11th of 2008?
Yes.
Does that photograph fairly and accurately depict the condition and the items inside that shed?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce AZ for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
282.
And permission to publish that item as well, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Is there an item in that photograph that was collected?
Yes.
Can you circle the item on your telestrator? If I may approach the witness with what has been marked as JV for identification.
You may.
Also marked is JW on the same exhibit. Investigator Murdoch, do you recognize the item marked JV for identification?
Yes, it does appear to be the item collected and photographed there.
What is it?
It is a red metal gas can.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce JV with conditional introduction of JW for identification since it's attached.
No objections.
Okay, they will be received in evidence.
JV, we have state exhibit number 283. JW, we have state exhibit number 284.
If I may have BA for identification? Sir, do you recognize what is shown in BA for identification?
Yes.
Were these, is this a variety of stickers that were collected at the residence on Hope Spring?
Yes.
Does that photograph fairly and accurately show those?
May we approach? We may have objections.
You may. You may proceed.
Thank you. Before I attempt to move BA in for identification, if we could switch over to AW. Investigator Murdoch, can you see AW?
Yes.
What is that a photograph of?
Appears to be the bedroom of Casey.
Casey Anthony?
Anthony, yes.
Okay. Is that the condition in which you and other crime scene investigators found it on December 11th of 2008?
I don't recall exactly how that room was that night. I'd have to refer to the photographs that were taken that evening.
May the witness have an opportunity to refresh his recollection with photographs taken during the search warrant on December 11th of 2008?
He may.
Yes, they do. It does appear to be the same
Okay.
condition.
Okay. May I also show the witness AX for identification?
You may.
Is that another photograph of the same room?
Yes.
Is that the condition in which it was found during the search warrant on December 11th of 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce AW and AX for identification into evidence.
What says the defense? You may.
Your Honor, we would object as to relevance. It would have been approximately 7 months before since Miss Anthony had lived in that room.
Objection will be overruled, be received in evidence as
EW becomes State's Exhibit 285, and AX becomes State's Exhibit number 286.
If we could go back to BA for identification. Investigator Murdoch, can you say that the picture in BA for identification was a picture taken of items that were found in Caylee Anthony's room?
I don't believe that photograph was taken on the evening of the 11th.
When was this one taken?
I believe that was taken during the search warrant on December 12th of 2000, or December 20th of 2008.
Okay. All right, let me come back to that then. If I may have BB for identification. Do you recognize what is shown in BB?
Yes.
Okay, and what do you recognize that to be?
That's a photograph of the bedroom of Caylee Anthony,
All right. Do you know when that photograph was taken?
the evening of December 11th.
Okay, does that
2008.
photograph fairly and accurately depict the condition of the room belonging to Caylee Anthony on that date?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce BB for identification into evidence.
No objections.
be received in evidence, states numbered.
287.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
May I unpublish at this point?
You may.
If I may have, I'm sorry. Did you collect items of evidence from that room?
Yes.
If I may show the witness KF and KE for identification?
You may.
Do you recognize KF? I'm sorry, did I show KE first?
Yes, I do.
The item that you are holding, is that KE or KF, since I have
It's
to come to
KE.
here? KE, do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
It is Winnie the Pooh bedding from Caylee Anthony's bedroom.
Okay, Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce K.E. for identification into evidence.
Be received in evidence, the state's number.
288.
You see K.F. right there next to you?
Yes.
Was that an item collected on that date?
Yes.
And what item is that?
It's also Winnie the Pooh bedding items collected from the guest or office dresser drawer.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce K.F. for identification into evidence.
It will be received in evidence, the state's number.
289.
Did you collect items from the garage of the Anthony residence on December 11th of 2008?
Yes.
If I may show the witness B.D. for identification.
You may.
Do you recognize what is shown in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate depiction of the garage of the Anthony residence on December 11th of 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce B.D. for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence, the state's number.
290.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
Unpublished.
You may.
Did you take a close-up photograph of items that were on the shelf in that garage?
I didn't personally take the photographs, but close-up items were taken of the items on that shelf, yes.
All right. Did you see the items in the position that they were in, and then you were responsible for the collection
That's
and
correct.
preservation of those items?
That's correct.
If I may show the witness B.E. for identification.
You may.
Are those, is that photograph taken of items enclosed in bags on the top shelf in the garage?
Yes.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate representation of the condition of those items on December 11th of 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce B.E. for identification as the state's next numbered exhibit.
No objections.
Be received in evidence, the state's numbered.
291.
Permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Ready to unpublish?
Yes, you may.
Were the items that were in those garbage bags on that shelf removed and photographed?
Yes.
If I may show the witness B.F. for identification.
You may.
Is that an item that was removed from the garbage bag on the shelf?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate picture of that item?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce BF for identification into evidence.
No objections.
You may,
State's Exhibit number 292.
And permission to publish.
you may publish.
Investigator Murdoch, what is that item?
It's a canvas type cloth laundry bag with the brand name Whitney Design.
Thank you. If I may have KD for identification?
You may.
Do you recognize the packaging of KD for identification?
Actually, the only part of the packaging I recognize is the sticker that's on it here, which is produced by our evidence section, which has the tag number and item number of that item that we're looking at in the photograph.
Right. Can you open the item and tell us if the item in the photograph is in the bag?
Yes. Yes, this bag does contain that item.
All right. So we had a package inside another package.
Yes.
So, all right. How is it that you recognize that?
I recognize it by the label that I made to depict what was in the item, as well as the evidence tape that's on the back that has my seals.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce KD for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections, Judge.
Would be you received an evidence that states numbered
293.
Going back within.
Did you also collect various garbage bags from the residence?
Yes.
Okay. If I may approach the witness with KA, KC, KB, JY, and JX for identification. Let's start with KA. Do you recognize KA for identification?
Yes, I recognize the packaging. It has my seals across.
Okay. And did you affix a label to some part of the package that tells you where that item was collected within the residence?
Yes. Written on, it looks like the label itself is no longer on here, but written on the bag itself, it does say it was taken from the garage wall.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce KA for identification into evidence.
What says the defense? You may.
What is the item in the packaging?
The item is, there's a number that I have written on there which corresponds to my property form, which is a black garbage bag.
No objection.
Be received in evidence the state's number.
294.
Do you recognize KB for identification?
Yes, I do.
And what is that item?
It's also a black garbage bag
Where was that collected from?
from the east garage area inside of a suitcase.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce KB for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Be received in evidence the state's number.
295.
Do you recognize KC for identification?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is a black garbage bag with yellow handles from the north garage inside of the cooler.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce KC for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence the state's number.
296.
Do you have JZ for identification there?
No, I don't.
All right. Do you have JY?
Yes.
Do you recognize JY?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
It's a black garbage bag with yellow handles from the south garage wall, top shelf.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce JY for identification into evidence.
You may.
State exhibit number 297.
Do you have JX for identification?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that item?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
For the record, I had no objections to that previous item.
Okay.
No,
And the ne-
no objections.
Yeah, no objections. Go ahead.
Okay.
JX?
It is a black garbage bag with yellow handles from the south shed.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce JX for identification into evidence.
There being no objections, it will be received in evidence the state's number.
298.
JZ. Do you recognize JZ for identification?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
2 black garbage bags with yellow handles from the north garage wall, upper shelf, inside of a dog crate.
Inside of?
A dog crate.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce JZ for identification into evidence.
No objections.
Be received in evidence the state's number.
299.
May I publish the photograph that is currently displayed, which has been introduced as 292 in evidence?
You may.
Investigator Murdoch, was that laundry bag that's in 292 in evidence inside one of those plastic garbage bags?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect which of those items in front of you contained that laundry bag?
That laundry bag was actually, the garbage bag that was around the laundry bag was packaged with that laundry bag. So they should be in the same packaging.
Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions of the witness. I'll return.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Murdoch.
afternoon.
Nice to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
The diagram that you showed us earlier, it showed us a piece of the Henkel duct tape outside of Area A. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know the measurements between where the skull was found as to how far away that duct tape was?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I could
Is there a way of-
retrieve it.
Can you?
Yeah, I could the same way that we just did it earlier.
Okay. With the court's permission, can you go ahead and do that?
Yes?
You don't have to put it on screen. Just
Okay,
go
I
ahead and
could
do
just-
it yourself and let us know. Unless it's easy to put it on screen.
I can do it just right here. It's fine.
Sure.
So you said from the skull to the piece of duct tape?
Yes.
Oh.
May I stand by you, sir?
Yes.
You may?
It's hard to see, but here's the distance. So it's approximately 6.27 feet.
6 1/4 feet away?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the search warrant, when you went to do the search warrant on the Anthony home, you knew you were looking for a special kind of duct tape, correct?
Yes, I knew the brand name that was found on the scene, yes.
Something distinctive, correct?
Yes,
It's a little different. It's not your average duct tape, which is just plain gray.
I just knew that it had a brand name on it.
And that's what you were looking for.
It was one of the items, yes.
And when you did that, you didn't find it in the garage? You didn't find any duct tape in the garage?
None was located, no.
Did you find an area where there was a lot of tape, other types of duct tape, or other types of electronic tape or things like that?
Honestly, I do not recall.
Okay. You didn't find it, the Henkel brand, wrapped around any items, like wires or anything like that?
No, if we had seen that, it would have been collected.
Okay. And you didn't find it wrapped around any pipes somewhere in the house?
No.
Okay. And you searched the entire garage, correct?
I didn't personally search the entire garage. I was in charge of the collection.
You were in charge of the recovery.
Right. So when items were discovered, they were photographed, and then I would collect them.
And they would call you over because you're in
Yes.
charge?
I was in charge of collecting, yes.
Okay. And you even went up to the attic?
I did not personally go to the
Not
attic.
you, but your team went into the attic?
Yes.
And searched that area and didn't find anything wrapped up with Henkel duct tape?
No.
You went throughout the house, your team, correct?
Yes.
And nothing was found in that house? correct?
With-
As far as the Henkel duct tape.
No, not on the inside of the house that I know of, because it was not collected.
Then you went out by the backyard area?
Yes, we were
Okay,
searching
that was
there.
also searched?
Yes,
Searched around the pool,
yes,
searched in the sheds,
that's correct.
and every item was taken out of those sheds, weren't they?
Yes,
And it was thoroughly searched.
to my knowledge, yes.
And there was no Henkel duct tape there, except for the one that you recovered.
On the gas can?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So after an extensive and exhaustive search, how many people were there searching?
I don't know the exact amount. There were 3 people from the forensics unit there. There were other investigators with our agency as well as the FBI there as well. So I would say approximately 10 to 15 people, I would imagine.
So between your agency and the FBI searching the entire Anthony home, this is the only item where you found Henkel brand duct tape,
That's correct.
and it was attached to this gas can.
That's correct.
Can I have photo AZ? Yes. 282. Your Honor, may I show the jury evidence item 282?
You may publish states 282.
Can you see that, Mr. Murdoch?
Yes.
Can the ladies and gentlemen of the jury see the photo? Now, while you searched for the duct tape, you, of course, all of these items were taken out,
From my knowledge, yes.
including these shovels over here,
Again, my knowledge, they were.
and there was no Henkel duct tape wrapped around the shovels or anything like that,
Not to my knowledge.
and none wrapped around any of the other yard items, like the rake,
Again, not to my knowledge, no.
this weed eater here, nothing was wrapped around that for Henkel duct tape.
Not to my knowledge.
And is that like a saw?
I'm not sure what that item is.
Okay. All of this lawn equipment, none of that contained duct tape, Henkel brand duct tape, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
And this lawnmower as well, nothing there.
Correct.
Do you know if there was a lock on that shed?
Yes, I believe there was.
And how was that open, sir?
Not sure, to be perfectly honest with you. There was people searching, collecting. I mean, I was notified when something was found to be collected. I'm not sure how that was opened.
Okay. And all of the items that you found were black garbage bags, correct?
All of the
All of the items that you just finished introducing today, with the exception of the blankets and the bedding in the bag, were black garbage bags, correct?
Yes.
Including the one right here in this garbage can.
I'm assuming that was one of the ones here. If I could refer to, can I
Sure,
refer
go
to my
ahead.
report? Yes, I do have a black garbage bag that was collected from that shed.
Okay. May I unpublish the photograph, Your Honor?
You may.
So what, as it relates to any duct tape, I know you've already testified, this is the only place you found it in the home. Did you ever find the roll anywhere?
No.
Did you search the vehicles that were in the home?
The vehicles were part of the search, yes.
Okay, and that includes a green 4Runner, Toyota 4Runner?
I believe that was the make of the vehicle.
Okay, and also a black PT Cruiser?
Yes.
Okay, and you didn't find any duct tape in any of those?
Again, I didn't personally search every item in the home, but nothing was brought to my attention that was found in there.
And you would have been notified if that were the case?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
No redirect, Your Honor.
May the witness be excused.
Yes, he may.
Thank you. You may be excused.
Thank you.
My name is Gerald M. Johnston, Gerald M. Johnston, Johnston.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Could you tell us how you are employed?
I am owner of a land surveying firm in Winter Garden, Allen and Company.
Okay. In connection with that employment, were you contacted in December of 1998 by the Orange County Sheriff's Office in order to provide a survey and 3D animation of a location off of Suburban Drive?
Yes,
Okay. Were photographs and measurements supplied to your firm to accomplish that task?
yes,
Have you had the opportunity to see the,
Can we do a correction? It's 2008,
did I say something other than 2008?
1998.
I don't know why I'm a decade off, wishful thinking, I guess. 2008, December
yes,
of 2008. Have you had the opportunity to see the video and the animation produced by your company for the Orange County Sheriff?
yes,
And that video is accurate based on the photographs and measurements provided to you or to your company?
yes,
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would seek to introduce QI for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
We received an evidence, the state's numbered.
And may we have permission to publish this item to the jury and then have the witness ultimately explain what it shows?
You may.
All right, sir, I've asked that that be paused. Can you explain to the jurors what we're looking at?
That is a combination of a point cloud and photo merged together, and it's representative of the ground topographic conditions at the time we were on the scene that day. At the top where it's cut off, for clarity to showing just the existing ground conditions only, we stripped away the trees, probably a couple of feet above ground level, just for clarity to show what's going on there on the ground.
Okay. Is the surface of Suburban Drive higher than the ground level in the areas depicted? Is that what is being
Yes.
shown here?
Yes, the edge of pavement, curb line are several feet above the ground as it falls away from the road.
What is a three-dimensional fly-through?
Basically, you are in space, if you will, and everything actually has three-dimensional qualities, as if you're in this room, puts you actually in there in a virtual environment, not unlike being in a video game, three-dimensional environment. And then you just go through with a bird's eye view as we track you through to see different elements.
All right. In the three-dimensional fly-through, are elements that were present at the scene removed again for clarity's sake? Trees
Yes.
and other ground cover?
Yes, trees were removed. A lot of the ground cover, I believe, was already gone as a function of the CSIs.
To the witness testifying to matters of which he has no knowledge of.
He indicated he was provided photographs by the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Judge Novaru.
You can finish your answer, sir.
Okay. The area, much of the existing ground cover, except for the trees and root systems, were all gone at that time we were there.
All right. There were some purple markers in the three-dimensional fly-through. What were those representative of?
Bones that were recovered by the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Right. They had Ron Murdoch with the Orange County Sheriff's Office provided you with data from his total station program to enable you to place those purple markers in the fly-through.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I have no other questions of the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination? May Mr. Johnston be excused?
Yes, he may. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the time is now approximately 11 to the hour of 1. That will conclude today's presentation of evidence. Please remember all of my previous admonitions. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not let anyone discuss this case with you. Do not read, watch, listen to any news accounts, nor engage in any internet searches or any other form of electronic media. Any additional instructions on behalf of the state or the defense?
None from the defense, sir.
Okay.
And Mr. Shaw, how are you employed?
I'm a hair and fiber examiner for the Federal Bureau of Investigation Laboratory.
And how long have you been employed in that capacity?
I've held my current position for approximately 6 years.
What educational background do you have that led you to your present position?
I have a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science. Both degrees are in textile chemistry, and both degrees are from North Carolina State University.
After you obtaining your degrees, did you immediately go to work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
No, after getting my degrees, I was a research associate for the university for approximately 6 months. Then I took another job in the textile industry where I was a senior research associate for approximately 6 months. And then I began work at the FBI laboratory.
During your time with the FBI, did you have additional education through the FBI itself?
Yes, I did.
What type of training was that?
I received, to become a hair and fiber examiner, I received approximately a 1-year training program where I was under the direct guidance of qualified hair and fiber examiners. And during that time, I examined numerous hairs and numerous fibers, and I had to complete tests throughout my training program, including identification tests, matching tests, oral boards, as well as moot court exercises.
And how long, and after that year period of time, did you then become working independently as a hair and fiber examiner?
After completing that year of time, I began working independently as a hair and fiber examiner.
And have you previously testified as an expert in that area in courts of law in the United States?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
12 times.
And in how many different jurisdictions?
I've testified prior in Florida, in New York, Virgin Islands, California, Montana, Illinois, Virginia, and there are a few.
All right. This time, Your Honor, I would submit the witness as an expert in the area of forensic hair and fiber identification and analysis.
What says the defense?
No objections.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the witness will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of hair and fiber identification. You may continue, Mr. Ashton.
Sir, back in the middle part of 2008, you were working at the FBI lab at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you become involved in doing a confirmation examination of a hair in the case involving Caylee Marie Anthony, which was designated as Q12, that Karen Korsberg Lowe had previously examined?
Yes.
Right. What's the purpose of that process of confirmation, as I think you call it?
Yeah, the confirmation process is really a quality assurance step to make sure anytime we have.
Apologize, Mr. Shaw. At this time, we would object and renew our previous motions and objections under Fry.
Based upon that objection would be overruled. You may continue. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So it's a part of our quality assurance procedure. So whenever we have an identification or we associate an association, we then have a second examiner to do an independent examination to see if they can reach the same conclusion or not.
Now, when you do that, do you already know the conclusions that the other examiner has found?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So in this case, were you looking to confirm the identification of a parent decomposition? Is that just that, or the comparison to the purported known hair as well?
It was a confirmation for the apparent decomposition, as well as microscopic similarities to a hair collected from a hairbrush.
And did you confirm both the apparent decomposition and the microscopic similarity to the hair from the hairbrush?
Yes, I did.
Did there come a time later in 2008 when you were called upon to examine some additional evidence as to the same case?
Yes.
And what came into the laboratory? First of all, why did you do the second examination as opposed to Ms. Lowe?
Because Ms. Lowe wasn't available at the time.
Now, what came into your laboratory? Were you submitted what is referred to as a hair mass?
Yes, I was.
If I could have State's Exhibit 271, Madam Clerk. Let me show you State's Exhibit 271 and ask if you recognize that as the item that we just referred to that was submitted to your laboratory.
I do recognize it.
And should that contain the hair mask that was submitted by Orange County Sheriff's Office and Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, according to the laboratory markings, it should.
Now, what type of examination did you perform on, and you designated this Q59 for your purposes, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what type of examination did you do on State's Exhibit 271, your Q59?
I examined the hairs from the hair mass microscopically, and I also then compared those hairs to the hair previously reported as originating from the trunk of a vehicle.
Now, when you examined the hair mass, did you find evidence of apparent decomposition on the hair mass?
Yes.
Did you find a band similar to what you had seen on the Q12 hair in the hair mass?
There was a band just above the end of the root. It was not similar, I would say, to the hair in the trunk, the band itself. It was a band just above the root, and the root itself had sort of a brush-like appearance. So it's really a later stage of apparent decomposition than what was seen in the trunk.
So the hair in the trunk, it had the band and still had the root? Do I understand that correctly?
It had, the hair in the trunk, yes, still had a band with root material below the band.
And the hairs in the Q59 had the band, but the root had a brush-like appearance?
That's correct.
And is that brush-like appearance associated with later stages of decomposition?
Yes.
Now, did you also compare the hairs in Q59, in essence, as a purported known sample of the victim's hair to the hair from Q59 to determine whether they were microscopically similar?
Yes, I did.
And what was the conclusion of that comparison?
The previously reported Q12 hair, Caucasian head hair exhibiting characteristics of apparent decomposition at the root end exhibited the same microscopic characteristics as the Caucasian head hairs from the hair mass. Accordingly, this hair and the hair mass are consistent with originating from the same source. However, it should be noted that hairs are not a means of positive identification. In other words, I cannot say that a hair did originate from a person to the exclusion of all others. I can say it is consistent. It should also be noted that the hair mass itself is not a suitable known hair sample. In other words, I did not have hairs plucked from an individual's scalp, from a known individual's scalp.
And the reason you add that caveat is because obviously you as an examiner cannot testify that the hair mass came from the victim, just that all you know is it was found with the victim. Is that the correct assessment of your caveat?
We don't know, I don't know the source of those hairs.
All right. Now, have you, in your work at the FBI, participated in a research project to further the scientific knowledge in the area of this decomposition artifact that we've been talking about?
I have, yes.
What type of research project have you been involved in?
I've been conducting a study that is still ongoing. I've just started writing the manuscript. I'm in that phase right now. So the preliminary results are 600 hairs stored in various locations. And these 600 hairs were collected from 15 living individuals, so 600 ante-mortem hairs. And the hairs, again, were stored in various conditions to include indoors on a windowsill, indoors buried in potting soil that was watered and fertilized weekly, indoors submerged in water, outdoors in a grassy area that received direct sunlight, outdoors in a wooded area that did not receive direct sunlight, and in 3 different vehicles. In the trunk of a vehicle that was used during the time periods, underneath the seat of a second vehicle that was also used during the time periods, and on the dash and in the trunk of a third vehicle that was not used during the time periods. And this vehicle was parked in a location where it could receive direct sunlight. The time periods varied anywhere from approximately a week to approximately 7 months. At the end of those time periods, I then examined hairs at the root end microscopically to determine changes, if there are microscopic changes at the root end. No hairs stored in the vehicles and no hairs indoors on the windowsill exhibited characteristics of apparent decomposition. Some of the hairs stored outdoors, most of the hairs buried in potting soil, and most of the hairs submerged in water did exhibit characteristics of apparent decomposition. And some of these characteristics are similar to characteristics we see in hairs removed post-mortem. However, no post-mortem banding was observed in any of these hairs. Okay, so they did exhibit some apparent decomposition, but no banding. I then set up a test where I included all hairs that had any possible changes at the root end in the test. I also included hairs known to be removed from deceased individuals, so known post-mortem hairs. Those also were included in this test. The test was given to 2 different examiners not involved in the initial analysis, but 2 different examiners. And they were given 3 answer sheets total. They were each given an answer sheet to do their initial analysis, and they were asked to identify any hairs given to them that exhibited characteristics of apparent decomposition with post-mortem banding. Besides their initial analysis answer sheet, they were also given a confirmed results answer sheet where they discussed their initial analysis to come up with one confirmed result. In the confirmed results, the hairs correctly identified all of the post-mortem banded hairs and excluded all of the environmental hairs in this study as being banded. In their initial analysis, examiner 1 correctly identified all of the postmortem hairs that were banded, but also included one of the antemortem hairs, so one of the environmentally studied hairs in this study, as banded. Examiner 2 correctly, in his initial analysis, identified all of the postmortem banded hairs, but also identified one of the hairs, one of the antemortem hairs, as banded. So each examiner initially made an error in determining banding. With their confirmed results, they excluded those two environmentally stored hairs and only had the post-mortem banded hairs as their confirmed result.
Let me clarify one thing on that. Did each of the 2, and again, was this test a blind test?
It was blind in that they didn't know the answers. They didn't know if any post-mortem hairs were actually put in to the test. They were aware that I had been doing a study on the environmental impact of hairs from living individuals, but that's all they knew.
All right. And just to clarify, one examiner in his initial examination picked out one hair as possible banding, and the other examiner in his initial examination picked out a different hair as possible banding. And then when the 2 got together, they agreed that both should be excluded as postmortem banding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation to demonstrate the results of your study?
Yes, I did.
All right. Let me show you State's Exhibit QL for identification and ask you, is that the PowerPoint to demonstrate the study?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, for demonstrative purposes, I'd like to publish to the jury State's QL. I'm not moving into evidence since it does not involve the evidence in this case.
Your Honor, may we approach? It's a disqualification. I apologize, Madam Court Reporter. I'm requesting that we do this in the form of a proffer, since we haven't had the opportunity to discuss this PowerPoint with the witness. It might be the optimal way of doing this.
Well, I'd rather not do a proffer because I mean, the witness has been deposed at length about the study. But if counsel has questions of him as they're looking at it, I don't have a problem with them asking them. Or we could just have them come over here and we can all sit down and go through it. The court can take a break, court reporter can take a break, and I don't have a problem with that at all.
It's however Your Honor wishes to proceed. We had no knowledge of this PowerPoint. Obviously, since we didn't have knowledge of it, we couldn't have discussed it with the witness. So,
Well,
whatever.
One at a time, Mr. Ashton.
Yes, sir.
Whichever way the court thinks is the most efficient and just way of proceeding, we're in agreement. But I'd certainly like to know what the witness will be describing and talking about as he goes through this PowerPoint.
Is it true that the defense has not been given this PowerPoint?
It is true we have not received it.
Just so, if I might respond to that.
Yes.
The actual PowerPoint, no. Everything in the PowerPoint, every photograph, yes. And that's my understanding, and Mr. Shaw can, let me just ask Mr. Shaw that. All the photographs in the PowerPoint have been provided to the defense, is that correct?
That's correct. They were provided to you.
And there's nothing in the PowerPoint but photographs. So there's no text, there's no discussion, anything like that.
Wow.
One point, if I need to. I can clarify one more point if the court feels necessary. One, we just received these photographs when we walked in this morning. Two, if there are photographs that were previously disclosed, they're black and white photocopies, which is significantly different than something that is in color. Everything that they've been presenting is in color. If they plan on presenting in black and white, okay, not a problem. We don't need to proceed any further. But if they're planning on going in living color, there's a difference.
This is what I would do. I will give them opportunity to have them displayed. Now, if there's some questions, Ms. Sims and Mr. Baez, you want to ask of the witness, I will permit you to do that, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, sir.
You want to go to the next slide?
May I stand at the podium so I can address?
Yes, you may.
Monitor, so.
Isn't there a monitor on the podium?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So may I inquire with the witness, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Mr. Shaw, can you please describe to us what we're looking at the screen right now?
Yes, these are hairs that were used in the study that I just described. What you see on this particular slide are hairs that were stored indoors on the windowsill for 233 days. Before, on the left-hand side, before it was stored on the windowsill, and after 233 days on the right-hand side.
Thank you, sir. We can proceed to the next slide. And this photograph, and this, this diagram here.
This also are hairs that were used in the study I just described, but on a vehicle dash, stored for 202 days. Again, a before shot on the left and an after photograph on the right-hand side.
Would you describe the after photograph, the darkening in the shaft area of the photograph, as some form of decomposition?
I'm not sure what dark area you're referring to.
I'll show you in a second if I can. Oh, I can't. This one doesn't work.
You have to do that from the podium.
This area here.
No, that is the medulla, which is the third central portion of the hair. So it's not apparent decomposition.
What is the darkening there that we see?
That is the medulla. There's three structural components to hair. The cuticle that surrounds the hair. There's the cortex, which is underneath that cuticle. And then running through the center of the hair is the medulla.
So that's something natural in someone's hair?
Yes.
Okay. We can go to the next slide. And what are we looking at here, sir?
These are also hairs used in the study I just described, hairs stored in the trunk of a vehicle before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Okay. All right, the next slide.
Additional hairs stored outdoors on the grassy area before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Okay, next photo.
Additional hairs stored in the wooded area before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
And the darkening at the root area, what would you classify that as on the after photos?
That is characteristics of apparent decomposition, but without a band.
Okay, we'll go to the next photo. And what does this describe, sir?
Hairs stored outdoors in a wooded area, before on the upper left-hand quadrant, and then 3 after shots following that one.
And the darkening near the root area, what would you describe that as?
It is characteristics of apparent decomposition, but again, not a band.
Okay. Next slide. And here?
This is, again, more hairs before on the left-hand side and after stored in an outdoor grassy area.
Okay, and the darkening at the root area?
It appears to be characteristics of apparent decomposition, but without a band.
Okay. Next photograph.
Additional hairs used in the study. These hairs on the left-hand side is before, and then on the right-hand side after. These hairs were stored in an outdoors grass area. Again, some apparent decomposition afterwards, but no band.
And when you refer to the banding, are you referring to the apparent decomposition reaching the entire width of the hair?
There's several things we look for in a band. The band has to be above the root or root bulb, and it has to be opaque, and it has to be a defined certain thickness and a certain length.
Okay. And so it has to be, what in here does not meet that qualification for a band?
It's not opaque. It's just some dark striations, but it's not opaque.
Okay. Other than that, it meets all of the other requirements.
It's also not clearly defined. Some of the striations run down into the root bulb, further down into the root.
Okay. All right, next slide.
This, again, are hairs stored in an outdoors wooded area, before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
And what is the darkening here?
That is characteristics of apparent decomposition, but not a band.
Okay, next slide.
Additional hairs submerged in water, before on the upper left-hand quadrant, after on the right, upper left, and lower center portion of the slide.
And what would you characterize the after to look like?
As apparent decomposition, but without a band.
Okay. Next slide.
These are also hairs submerged in water, before shot on the upper left-hand quadrant, after shots on the upper right-hand quadrant and lower center portion of the slide. And this hair also exhibits characteristics of apparent decomposition, but without a band.
Now, there are certain characteristics that appear to be different from those that are submerged in water. Can you account for the differences in those, or is that just an unknown phenomenon?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
There appears to be a differences between some of the hairs that are showing what apparent decomposition. Can you account for those differences?
In this study, the antemortem hairs.
Yes, in the antemortem hairs.
No, I don't know why in certain, the apparent decomposition occurs in certain locations versus other, or why the apparent decomposition looks different among the antemortem hairs.
And the difference could be the person, something in their genes that makes their hair change?
I don't know what the difference is.
Okay. But there are various factors that you may consider, correct?
There are various factors involved. I just don't know what would affect the apparent decomposition we're seeing in these antemortem hairs.
All right. Next slide. What do you have here, sir?
This is another hair submerged in water for 100 days. Before on the upper left-hand quadrant, after on the upper right-hand quadrant, and on the lower center quadrant.
And what do you have here?
It also is characteristics of apparent decomposition, but not what we would classify as a band.
Okay. Next slide.
Another images of hairs used in the study I described, submerged in water for 100 days, before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Next slide. What do you have here, sir?
Additional hair submerged in water for 100 days, before on the left-hand side, afterwards on the right-hand side.
And is there any apparent decomposition here?
Yes, you can see that the root portion, the soft tissue on the root portion is smaller, and there are some striations also.
Okay. Next slide. What do you have here, sir?
Additional hairs buried in potting soil, before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Now, prior to this case beginning, was there a distinction between apparent decomposition and the banding?
Yes.
Okay. So there were, I guess, under your protocols, a difference that you can make a call on what's postmortem banding and what's apparent decomposition.
Well, apparent decomposition is more of a broader category. It includes postmortem banding.
Okay. And is there a call that can be made that it is postmortem banding, or is it always listed as apparent decomposition?
I'm sorry.
When you have a finding in a report, is it always postmortem root banding, or always? Let me rephrase that. Is it always apparent decomposition, or are there sometimes decisions made to call things postmortem root banding? In your analysis, at least for me, I would identify it as apparent decomposition, even if it was banding, and just include in my notes that it was banned. Okay. Would those notes be included in the report?
No.
Okay. All right. Next. What do you show here, sir?
These are additional hairs buried in potting soil, and it's before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Okay. Next. What do you have here, sir?
Again, buried in potting soil for 100 days, before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
Okay. And I think we have one more. What do you have here, sir?
Again, buried in potting soil for 100 days, before on the left-hand side and after on the right-hand side.
And this also includes the apparent decomposition?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, I have no further questions, Judge.
There's another. No, there's more than one PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. What do we have here, sir?
This is a hair stored in water for 17 days, exhibiting some characteristics of apparent decomposition. And I'll say that some of the characteristics that I'm saying when I call it apparent decomposition are not necessarily similar to hairs we see to the decomposition we see in hairs removed post-mortem. They're just characteristics of apparent decomposition. This one is one that was identified as banding by examiner 1 in the study that I conducted.
Okay. And examiner 2 did not find it to be.
That's correct.
Did they know they were working in actual casework or in a study?
They knew that it was a study.
Okay. Next slide, please.
This is a photograph of a hair that examiner 2 also identified as banded in the initial analysis.
And the qualifications of these two examiners, are they trainees or are they very experienced?
No, they're trained hair and fiber examiners.
Okay, so they're just like yourself and Miss Lowe.
Yes, they're just as qualified as I am.
Okay. All right, next.
This is a hair, postmortem hair that was included in the test.
And what are we looking at here exactly?
This is
What's the history of it, I guess?
a postmortem band
Okay.
in this area.
And this was taken from a cadaver?
Right, cadaver stored outside on the ground surface.
Okay. How long had the person been deceased? This one.
I don't know. I could look that up in my notes. I have it in the notes.
Do you have that readily available?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The person was placed, according to the notes, on January the 27th, 2004. And then the hair was collected on March the 5th of 2004.
And
So approximately 6 days.
they have
Sorry, a month and 6 days. Approximately over a month.
were they completely skeletonized?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
And in what atmospheric conditions was this person? And were
I don't-
they in the cold
I don't-
weather, warm climate?
It was in Tennessee. I don't know exactly what the conditions were.
Tennessee in January.
Yes.
Okay. Next.
This is another hair of a removed post-mortem from a cadaver stored outside on the ground surface.
Next. Let me go back. I'm sorry. Was this the same person? The last slide?
Yes, it was.
So it's the same person, two different types of postmortem banding characteristics?
Well, they're both post-mortem bands.
Okay. But the characteristics appear to be different, do they not?
One appears to be closer to the root than the other.
Okay. Next. What do we have here?
This is another post-mortem hair removed from a cadaver stored inside a house.
Not the same person, is it?
No.
Okay. And where was this person at? In Tennessee as well?
Yes.
And what were the climate conditions?
It was January again. I don't know if this was an air-conditioned house or not, or a heated house or not.
January in Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't know the conditions about the atmospheric conditions?
No. I don't have that information with me.
Okay. Was it? So you don't know if this was an abandoned house or somewhere, or fortunately not a house that somebody lived in.
I would hope not. I don't know for sure.
Okay. Was it from a scene?
No.
A crime scene or
no?
an actual
These are all tested hairs from the University of Tennessee, the Anthropological
Okay.
Center.
All right, next slide. What do we have here, sir?
This is a a hair removed post-mortem from cadaver stored in the vehicle.
And what were the conditions of this person? Was this also in Tennessee?
Yes,
What month?
February to March.
Okay. And do you know if what the climate conditions of that were?
No, just the general month and location.
Okay. Next. What do we have here, sir?
Another cadaver stored inside a house in January.
In Tennessee.
Yes, correct.
And you don't know whether it was heated, air conditioned, or what the conditions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Next. What do you have here?
Another post-mortem hair with post-mortem banding from a cadaver outside on the ground surface in January and February in Tennessee.
Okay. And this is from what conditions again? Outside on the ground
Correct.
surface?
Correct.
Okay. Next.
Another hair post-mortem, removed post-mortem from cadaver stored outside on the ground.
And what do we have?
In February in Tennessee.
February in Tennessee.
Right.
Okay. Next.
Another hair from cadaver stored outside on the ground surface in January, Tennessee.
Okay. Next.
Another hair from cadaver stored outside on the ground surface in January 2004 and February.
Okay. And next.
Another hair exhibiting postmortem banding from cadaver stored outside on the ground surface in February from Tennessee.
Okay. Next.
Hair removed from cadaver stored in a vehicle in February and March in Tennessee.
Next.
Another hair from a cadaver with postmortem banding stored inside a house in January 2005.
Okay. Now, sir, is that the end of it? Or are there any
I believe
others?
it is.
One more? That's just one more photograph or one more PowerPoint? Are you going to introduce 3 PowerPoints, Mr. Ash?
These are additional hairs. Sure.
If you feel they're helping your explanation, then it's up to you.
No, I really don't.
Okay, then we'll just use the 2.
Okay. Now, sir, the climate is the number one factor when you take decomposition into consideration, is it not?
It's my understanding that climate can affect the rate of decomposition. That's really not my area of expertise, but that's my understanding.
And do you know what type of effect climate has on postmortem root banding?
Yes, we have studied that some.
Okay. And what have you studied, and what are your findings?
We've studied approximately over 20,000 hairs from Tennessee, from over 20 individuals. And hairs in warmer and just in general hairs or cadavers in warmer climates will produce band earlier than hairs in colder climate. Hairs are moving in colder climates.
Okay. I have no further questions, Stretch.
You may.
Mr. Shaw, all of these hairs are from adults that you have in these PowerPoints, correct?
I believe that's true. I don't have all the information with me, but I believe that's correct.
Okay. And the difference is in a child's hair. There are differences between a child's hair and an adult's hair, correct?
We can't determine that a hair is from a child or from an adult. Depending on the age, sometimes the hair can be thinner. Sometimes the cuticle can be thinner, but we can't say that a hair came from a child by examining it or an adult.
Do you observe, in your experience, different characteristics in children's hair versus adults?
No, I wouldn't say there are.
What about that of a young child, a toddler?
A younger child, depending on how young, the hairs can be thinner.
Okay. And how many children's hairs did you use in this study?
2.
Just 2 hairs?
2 test subjects.
2 test subjects.
Yeah, 2. There was 15 individuals total,
Okay.
600 hairs total. Of the 15 individuals, 2 of those were children.
And were there differences in some of the findings?
No,
Did you expose the children's hairs to the same conditions that you exposed the ones that showed apparent decomposition,
yes.
including water?
I'll have to check and see.
Please do.
No. The children were used in one child was used in the first 4 locations. My last 4 location study that I did, it was all adults. That include immersion in water, burying potting soil. One of the studies in a wooded area and one of the studies on a lawn.
And none of these,
In a grassy area.
and none of these subjects, all 15 of them, were ever exposed, their hairs were never exposed to any type of trash or garbage materials?
Not that I'm aware of.
No further questions.
I have no questions on the proffer.
Mr. Baez?
Yes, sir. We would renew our previous motions and objections. As to these 2 different PowerPoints, I think we have an issue of them being cumulative, number 1. Number 2, the conditions are completely different than that of this case, and we would argue that that creates an unfair prejudice. And in addition to that, we would consider this improper bolstering. To use hairs from a cadaver in Tennessee in the winter months of an adult that shows postmortem root banding to a case in Florida in the summertime at very early, what the state would argue would be very early stages of decomposition. We're talking apples and oranges here, Judge. I think there's no similarity, and it would be improper bolstering. You can't, they're not even matching up the same scenarios. And even if it were, I think it would be improper bolstering.
What was the second ground that you said cumulative and you said something else before you got the improper bolstering?
403, Judge.
403 in what sense?
It's an unfair prejudice.
Unfair prejudice in what sense, Mr. Baez?
Well, we're given this not at the 11th hour, at the last second. We don't have the ability to conduct an independent study. This is a study being introduced, and it's apparent results of a study. And it was specifically designed for this case.
So your argument is not a 403, your argument is a Sixth Amendment right to confrontation.
And I would classify the
unfair prejudice of this under 403 as well, Judge. I think there are multiple attacks on this study and this and these PowerPoints to be used. If we were talking about, if the witness wants to talk about generic, show one or two photographs as the previous examiner did to help show the jury to understand the differences, that we understand. But to do a complete and entire study with 2 PowerPoint presentations with approximately 30 photographs, I see numerous issues with this, Judge.
Mr. Shaw, when was this study that you are about to testify to provided to the state of Florida?
It was in March of 2011 that we told the state and the defense together that we had conducted a study.
What information was provided to the state and what information was provided to the defense, if you know, concerning this study? And when, if you know, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. We told them at that time, actually I wasn't present. It was Ms. Lowe that informed them that we had been doing a study at that time. And that's all, I don't know what she said at that time.
Okay. Was the study ever provided to the state of Florida in a written format or a digital format?
It was provided in a hard copy, in a written format, and along with these photographs.
Do you recall whether the photographs was provided to the state in black and white or in color?
They were provided in color.
Do you recall when that was provided to the state of Florida? I know you said they were advised in March of 2011.
Right.
I'm trying to ascertain when that written study and the color photographs were provided to the state.
We had a deposition in early May where the photographs at that point were discussed and were forwarded on to both the state and the defense.
Okay.
The written portion was more recent. I don't recall exactly when that entire case packet was FedExed to the state.
I can assist the court in that, if you like.
One more question. What you provided to the state in terms of photographs, were they in color or were they in black and white?
They were emailed to the Orlando field office. I don't know how they were printed off.
Okay, but were they provided in color or were they in black and white? Or if you don't know, you don't know.
When I emailed them, they were emailed in color.
Okay. All right, Mr. Ashton, can you?
Can, sir. As the witness indicated, in March of this year, we were informed, the state and the defense simultaneously, by Paula Wolf, Assistant General Counsel with the FBI, about the existence of the study. There was a telephone conference between myself, Mr. Baez, Ms. Wolf, and Ms. Lowe, in which the study was in general described. Mr. Shaw was set for deposition, which deposition was taken on May the 3rd by Ms. Sims and myself. During that, there was discussions about production of the photographs from the study. An arrangement was made over numerous emails over the succeeding weeks between Ms. Sims and Ms. Wolf, copied to me, about viewing the photographs. My understanding from these emails was that the photographs in question or requested were sent by email to the local FBI field office, and that counsel was allowed to come to the office and view the photographs. I was not there, presumably in color, but Ms. Sims can speak to that, whether they were in color or not. There was additional request to view additional photographs. I believe I was involved in the emails, but not really participating. Ms. Wolf, by the way, is here, general counsel, if the court wants to have her represent the FBI in this matter. That I understand that Ms. Sims made another trip to the FBI field office, I think on the weekends. They opened it up for her to look at the photographs. At some point through this negotiation with the FBI, they agreed to produce copies of some reports, documents, and photographs, which they sent to me, which we then copied and passed along in discovery to Ms. Sims. The photographs we have are in color. This is the first I've heard that theirs were not. If that's the case, I was not aware of that until just a moment ago. But as far as I'm aware, the FBI has gone to great lengths to accommodate the defense in allowing them to see the photographs, to understand the full nature of this as yet incomplete research project. And I believe the written form that the witness was discussing was provided to the defense, I want to say early part of last week, but my copy doesn't actually have a date on it.
Ms. Sims, if you're gonna, both sides, if you're gonna talk, you need to turn the microphones on if you.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Okay.
My understanding, I wrote down that it was received on the 9th, which was last week, and we did not receive all of the PowerPoints, and what we received were black and white photographs that aren't particularly clear.
And there were 4 additional photographs that apparently were requested after that packet was received. Those were provided to me last night. I provided those 4 to Ms. Sims this morning by leaving them on the table. They are color copies. Again, I was not aware until a moment ago that the copies given were not acceptable. I was never informed until just now.
We were never provided color copies of anything until today. What happened on May the 3rd was I took Mr. Shaw's deposition. I had previously requested all photographs.
Slow down, Ms. Sims.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had previously requested that all photographs and data having to do with the experiment be brought to the deposition. I was not advised that they would not be all of them produced. In the, I guess 2/3 through the deposition, some of the photographs were sent to the field office so that I could look at them. But I was then told at that deposition that Mr. Shaw did not have all of the photographs. I went to the FBI to look at the color photographs that were provided that I was not permitted to copy, and look at the report that I was not permitted to copy, and thereafter was advised that there were additional photographs, I believe, that Mr. Shaw took with his cell phone. So I went back to the FBI. I was still not permitted to make color copies of the photographs, take copies of anything. And when I requested the ability to speak to Mr. Shaw through Ms. Wolf, that was not able to be done. So I've not had the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Shaw with regard to the actual data, the hard copies of the paperwork involving this experiment, to determine if it meets FRI standards. And I would object based on FRI issues as well, because that has not been established. This is an experiment, and it hasn't been established that the methods are reproducible. But I was never given any copies for me to keep or take, and I requested multiple times of the colored.
The FBI indicated that because this was an ongoing research project, that they could not release unpublished data. But they have gone to incredible lengths to allow counsel to view these photos. And I think counsel has not indicated that there's any photograph here she hasn't seen through this process. And I think that is probably an essential issue. I believe she has seen all of these photographs. So at any rate, that's all I have, unless the court wants to hear from General Counsel Wolf, who's here.
Now, just one second. Mr. Ashton, before Mr. Baez, would you address the issue of improper bolstering?
Your Honor, an issue has been raised by the defense through the testimony and cross-examination of Ms. Lowe as to whether this postmortem artifact can be created by something other than the contact of the hair with a decomposing human body. This is simply further scientific research to answer that question. Bolstering, as I understand the term, would refer to an expert using a published article by someone else during their direct testimony to bolster their own opinion. This is an example of original research by this witness to answer the scientific question of whether this particular postmortem artifact can be created by something other than its contact with a decomposing human body. So I do not believe that this would constitute bolstering, and part of bolstering is a hearsay issue. You know, you're talking about what someone else says. This expert is talking about his own research and the outcomes of that research thus far.
Mr. Baez?
Yes, we brought this to the court's attention back in March, and we had a concern then. And the concern was that we find ourselves in the middle of trial and an expert takes the stand and we're talking about things that we haven't had the ability to have an independent examination of under 3.220, I believe 1J. And here we are towards near the end of the state's case where we're talking about a study that we have done every single thing we can, going to the FBI office on Saturday, and the FBI has been very accommodating. There's no doubt about that. There's been absolute and complete 100% cooperation from the FBI. However, that still doesn't take us away from, we picked a jury in this case, we've dealt with opening statements as well as numerous witnesses, cross-examination of another witness, and then here we are talking about and showing photographs from approximately 30 photographs of a study that we had limited exposure to. And that's where we are. Now, if that's fair, I'll accept the court's ruling, but I think under the multiple areas that we've laid out, how we've brought it to the court's attention, how we've been trying to stay even in the middle of jury selection and preparing for trial and actually trying this case, we've been dealing with the FBI to try and get caught up. So the court cannot come to us and say, well, you had an opportunity to do something and you didn't do anything about it. In fact, it's the contrary. We have gone, I haven't been able to attend these, but fortunately Ms. Sims has. But these are the steps that we've taken. And again, we're near the end of the state's case, and we get this stuff at the last minute. This is something that is not peer-reviewed. This is a study that was specifically designed for this case. And if the court wishes to inquire with the witness, this began after the deposition was taken of Mr. Shaw. In this case, when we went to Washington, Mr. Ashton and myself.
May I add 2 points, Jeff? If
you may.
It's done. The first point is that the FBI had offered to transmit these materials to the FBI field office in the location of the defense's expert so that they could examine it. And I understand that the defense did not take them up on that, so there has been an opportunity for their expert to examine this material. Second is this, and we will get testimony from the witness on this. This study was contemplated before the deposition in this case. He will acknowledge that obviously the deposition spurred him on to get started with it, or words to that effect, but this was started because of an article raising the issue and indicating that additional research needed to be done. So to say it was done for this case is absolutely not true, though the case did have some inspiration for it. That's all I wanted to say.
Anything else from the defense? The defendant in this case is charged by indictment with the crimes of murder in the first degree, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to a law enforcement officer. The state has indicated by notice filed that they seek the ultimate sanction, in this case, death by lethal injection upon the defendant if the defendant is convicted of the crime of murder in the first degree. Rule 3.220 specifically provides the state of Florida with the specific obligation to provide certain things to the defendant. It is not the FBI's sole responsibility to provide particular items. The Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution, made applicable to the states via the 14th Amendment, provides that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to confront the witnesses against him or her. There was no objection lodged at Mr. Shaw's testimony dealing with the particular study, but the court does find it troubling that the state at the 9th hour provides a PowerPoint with color photographs that was not provided to the defense. Therefore, the court will not permit the utilization of the PowerPoint since it was not provided to the defense. Since there was no objection to his testimony thus far to the study, and he has testified to his study, then the record will stay as it is, but the court will not permit the utilization of the PowerPoint. Simply, we cannot simply say that it's the FBI's study, and that they have a right to disseminate it when they want to, which may be true. But if they want to disseminate the study when they want to, don't expect to use it in a court of law when they want to or when you want to. It is the state of Florida who is the proponent and will be presenting this evidence, and it is the state of Florida's obligation, not the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to decide when they want to let something go and when they don't want to let something go, particularly when one wants to initiate the ultimate sanction given by law. Therefore, the court will sustain the objection to the use of the PowerPoint. We will take a 5-minute recess so the attorneys and court reporter refresh themselves. But since there was no objection to that particular testimony, then you can continue, but we will not allow the PowerPoint to be used since it is quite evident that depositions were taken dealing with the study. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
May I ask just one point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
So the court's indicating none of the photographs that are contained in the PowerPoint should be used.
Right.
Okay.
Now,
that's fine.
the flip side to that now is if the defense opens the door and start talking about where the photographs, then that may reopen the issue for the court to let it in. So you cannot use a shield and turn it into a sword. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes. You may be seated.
May I just clarify something for the record?
Yes.
I would note for the record at 9:06 a.m., I did object, and In addition to that, I also renewed our previous motions and objections under Fry as well. I believe in March, when we had this issue come up, we also objected, and I just wanted to clarify that for the record, Judge.
Your previous objections that you objected dealt with Fry. And we had a hearing on the Fry issue. The basis of my ruling, you made a couple of more additional objections. They were cumulative, 403, which was undue prejudice and improper bolstering. The court's ruling was based upon the fact of a Sixth Amendment issue dealing with an exhibit that you, one, had not seen, two, that the items that were provided to you in black and white, and these are all color exhibits where color is not a sub-issue. That in order to intelligently evaluate these particular exhibits, black and white photographs would be patently unfair. So the court struck the particular exhibit. You have had an opportunity to take the deposition of the FBI agent. You've had an opportunity to look at the study, I presume, and you've had other numerous opportunities to do that. You have not outlined nor pointed out anything that this gentleman, Mr. Shaw, has testified to that you did not know in deposition, or you could not deal with this particular issue of post-mortem hair banding. So that was my ruling. This court felt that this exhibit, even though it was a demonstrative exhibit, it did put the defense at a severe disadvantage by not having an opportunity to view it ahead of time. So that's why, quote, one, I overrule the objection to the testimony about the study, but I disallowed the use of the exhibit. You're not saying now that you did not have an opportunity to take Mr. Shaw's deposition?
No, sir.
And is there anything that he has testified to that's not contained in his deposition?
The only issue, Judge, is that we could not depose him after we had viewed what was turned over to us on, what's this?
And if you had been given that opportunity, what information you would have hoped to glean from an additional deposition that you do not already know? You can consult with your colleagues. You may.
We wanted to be able to inquire based on what we were observing and ask him more questions about the study.
The problem with that is What we don't know is a wide universe of things that we don't know. As both sides, the state and the defense, you have to be able to show some type of prejudice. Going back to Brady versus Maryland, in all the line of cases dealing with not having information, a Richardson inquiry, you must be able to show a prejudice as a result. It's not that I don't know, because I don't know translates into nothing.
Well, I could certainly say that we wouldn't have been able to duplicate any of the issues that would come up with the study with our own independent expert. That would certainly be one that I don't think we could argue with.
If we go back in time to when we were talking about this study originally, one of the things I indicated was that unfortunately throughout this country and throughout the world, there are scientific studies that spring up and results that occur each and every day. So the possibility that you could not replicate or duplicate is not a basis for an objection. Now, I know of no case that stands for the proposition that you've just cited. Now, if there's one, I'm all ears to listen to it.
There's very limited circumstances where something like this would occur at the end of the state's case. So I would probably agree with that assessment.
Okay. So that was my ruling, and I apologize for not making it clear earlier, but that was the basis of my ruling. Anything else, folks, before we continue?
Not from the state of Florida.
Okay, let's return to jury. State recognized presence of jury.
Yes, sir.
Defense.
Yes, sir, we do.
You may continue, Mr. Ashton.
Mr. Shaw, we were discussing the study that you have performed. Let me go back and ask you, what caused you to become interested in doing a study like this? What was the inspiration for that?
It really was started because of a thesis that I came across at John Jay College, where they had taken hairs from living individuals and placed them in soil and in water, and had gotten decomposition in those hairs at the root end, or apparent decomposition. And it was suggested in that study that these hairs, additional research is needed, and that these hairs be compared, or hairs like them compared to post-mortem hairs. And so that's what I did.
So the thesis study found some sort of artifact in hairs from live people in those environmental conditions, but suggested that further study needed to be done comparing them to actual post-mortem hairs.
That's correct.
Right. Now, did this particular case, your involvement in this particular case, have any, give you any additional interest in doing this study?
I think I probably would have done this study anyway, just not when I did. I think it was more of a priority because of this case.
Because of the issues in this case?
Correct.
Now, was the purpose, if you can put it in one line for us, what was the purpose of the study? What were you trying to figure out?
I was trying to recreate banding in hairs from living individuals.
Now, do hairs even that are not connected to living individuals still decompose in some respect?
Yes, they can if they're exposed.
Was the purpose to determine whether this particular artifact of decomposition could come from a live person's hair? Was that what you were looking for?
That's correct.
And again, how did you get the hairs for the study?
I went through an approval process to collect the hair samples, and then I asked for volunteers to volunteer their hair samples.
And request that this testimony be limited. Lack of disclosure. We don't have a copy of what he's testifying about.
Objection overruled.
Again, how many individuals did you take hair samples from?
I took hair samples from, I received hair samples from 18 individuals. I used 15 in this study.
And were these hairs that were actually pulled from the volunteer individuals?
Yes, correct.
What were the gender distribution of these individuals?
Males and females.
And what were the age ranges of the individuals?
The youngest was 3. The oldest was, I believe, 53. I may have to check. It's 52 or 53.
In their 50s?
Yes.
Okay. And what variety of environmental conditions did you expose these hairs to in order to do this study?
Indoors on a windowsill, indoors buried in potting soil with plants that were watered and fertilized, indoors submerged in water, outdoors in an area exposed to sunlight, outdoors in a wooded area not exposed to sunlight, and in 3 different vehicles. In the trunk of a vehicle that was used during the time period, underneath the seat of a second vehicle that was also used during the time period, and on the dash in the trunk of a third vehicle that was not used during the time period and was parked, remained stationary throughout the time periods and was parked in direct sunlight.
When you say used during the time period, you mean someone's vehicle that was actually used on a daily basis?
Correct. I mean, someone continued about their normal use with the hairs in their location.
And how did you, place the hairs or isolate them so that they would be undisturbed for the study, like in the cars, for instance?
I used tape to fold over the distal ends, the tip ends of the hairs, leaving the proximal or root end of the hairs exposed. And then I gave these hairs to individuals to place in the vehicles, and told them, not to clean their vehicle or anything, but just place these hairs as they are, as their vehicle is, or whatever the conditions, however they exist.
All right. And did you check the hairs at intervals as to each environmental condition, or just at the end?
I would check sort of an earlier time period, so around 1 to 4 weeks, and then I would check at a longer time period. So the ones collected at a shorter time period were collected and examined. There were additional hairs that were not disturbed, and those were placed between 3 months and approximately 7 months.
Is the difference between what you refer to as a postmortem banding and other types of decomposition a subtle difference?
Overruled.
In my opinion, it's an obvious difference.
And in your study, when you examined all of these hairs from all of these different environmental conditions from live people, did you find any that, in your opinion, would qualify as postmortem banding?
No, I did not.
Now, you discussed a blind study that you did of some of these hairs and the outcome of that. Tell us about that.
Yes, I included all the hairs with any possible change at the root end into this test, as well as hairs known to be removed from deceased individuals. They were also included in the same test. And the test was given to 2 different examiners who were asked to identify any hairs exhibiting characteristics of parent decomposition with postmortem banding. They were given 3 answer sheets total, an answer sheet each for their initial analysis, and then a confirmed results answer sheet where they discussed their initial analysis to come up with one confirmed result. In examiner one's initial analysis, he correctly identified all the postmortem banded hairs, but also identified an antemortem hair, so one of the hairs in this study, as banded.
Let me ask you a question about it before
Yes.
you go on. So this examiner number one picked out one of the hairs that was from a live person as initially indicating it might have postmortem banding. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Okay. And how about the other examiner?
The second examiner also correctly identified all the postmortem banded hairs, and also in his initial analysis identified one of the antemortem hairs in this study as banded.
But did he identify the same one that the first examiner had identified?
No, they were different hairs stored under the same conditions, but different hairs. And so in their final, when they discuss and they come up with one confirmed results, they excluded those two hairs.
Now, that coming together, that conferencing, is that something that examiners would do in a real case if they disagreed on a call?
Yes.
So that basically, did that imitate the real world environment of how examiners come to decisions?
It's similar.
So in the end, they agreed that neither was postmortem banding. Is that?
That's correct.
Now, in this study, did you find hairs with apparent decomposition?
Yes.
And is postmortem banding a sort of a specific subset of various artifacts of decomposition of a hair?
Yes, it is.
So while you found decomposition in the hairs, did you find any that had postmortem banding?
Not in the study, no.
Now, did you also bring with us today a copy of a photograph, a digital copy of a photograph of the actual Q12 hair that you examined as a confirming examiner with Ms. Lowe back in 2008?
Yes.
Right. QM.
What says the defense?
No objections.
To be received in evidence, the state's number.
301.
Mr. Shaw, you see the state's exhibit 301 that's on screen in front of you.
Yes, I do.
And is that the photograph of the particular hair, which is designated Q12 in this case?
Yes.
May I publish it?
You may publish.
Okay, now that we have the actual photograph in front of us, can you show the jury the postmortem band that you saw in this case and upon your confirming examination?
Sure. The band is in between these two lines, so that dark, opaque area above the root.
And is that a fairly classic example of postmortem banding?
Overruled.
It's what I would identify as postmortem banding. Yes, it's a band above the root, a root bulb.
And again, is that artifact we see in this photograph, was that seen in any of the photographs in your study involving live persons?
No, it was not.
No further questions.
Motion to strike will be denied. Cross-examination.
May it please the court,
You may proceed, Mr. Baez.
Mr. Ashton. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Mr. Shaw.
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
Very good.
I want to ask you just a few questions about, first off, the hair that you observed in this case, the Q12, the one we saw the photograph. You testified that when you got the 59, Q59, which was the hair mat from Suburban Drive, that the characteristics were not similar, correct?
What I was speaking of is the characteristics of the root portion itself. I did not do a side-by-side comparison of the root portions, but the hair from the trunk had root material below the band. The hairs in the hair mass had a dark band just above the end of the root, but it had more of a brush-like, it's what I would classify as a brush-like appearance to it.
So it was a different appearance to you.
Yes.
And that's why you testified that you would not say it's similar.
Speaking just about the root portions, that's correct. They were dissimilar.
Okay. And when you observed and you did this study, you were prompted to do it based on the thesis from John Jay College, the graduate student, correct?
That's correct.
And this study found live people to have apparent decomposition and postmortem root banding, did it not? From live people.
No, they did not make that conclusion. They referred to some of their changes as fraying, darkening, and they did refer to some of their changes as banding, but they indicated it was a band further down into the root, so closer to the end of the root than postmortem is observed.
Okay. And that would be the one you would find similar from, that description would best fit the description of the Q59 sample that you examined?
It's closer to that, but what they were seeing is decomposition in the actual root material itself. The hair mass did not have much of any root material remaining. It was mostly just a shaft, the band just above the end of the hair.
Okay. Now, the study that you have, you were, and from what you've also seen in your experience, you've seen darkening near the root, or actually on the root, correct? From live people?
In this study, down into the root bulb, yes.
Okay. And you've also seen it further up the hair, correct?
We've seen striations further up the hair.
Okay. And I know in your testimony, you claim that the difference is obvious between what you call apparent decomposition and postmortem root banding, right?
Correct. Well, I'm sorry. Apparent decomposition is an umbrella of different types of decomposition that we see. As far as apparent decomposition from removed from individuals after they have deceased, postmortem banding is one of the types of apparent decomposition that we see.
It's a broader term.
Apparent decomposition is a broader term.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
And that's what Ms. Lowe indicated in her report, that there was apparent decomposition, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you had mentioned that the differences, of course, are obvious to you.
Yes.
Okay. But they weren't quite obvious to the examiners that assisted you in the study, correct?
Correct. In their initial analysis, they did identify one of the antemortem hairs each as banded.
So what we're really talking about when you look at some darkening, and let's take this step by step. You get a hair, you inspect it under a microscope, correct?
Correct. I examine it using a microscope.
And you make a call. You make a decision. You give your opinion.
Correct. We examine the hair and the characteristics that are present, and based on our training and our experience, we reach conclusions.
Okay. And when these two different examiners on two different hairs gave their opinion, they were wrong.
Correct. They did commit errors.
Okay. And when we say they were wrong, we're really just saying that they said what was banding is different than what you say is banding, correct?
No, that's incorrect. They realized between themselves they made errors in their initial analysis and were able to exclude with the confirmed results, we're able to exclude those 2 hairs.
Let me see if I can redo the question, because I'm not certain I asked you this correctly.
Sustain, rephrase your question.
Let me rephrase this, sir.
Sure.
You don't know if postmortem root banding is exclusively from people who are deceased, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you can never testify in a court of law to such a fact.
That's correct.
Okay. So when someone says this is postmortem root banding, they're not saying it's from a dead person, correct?
That's correct. Not
Okay.
exclusively.
So that's what I meant when I said the person who made the call, they were wrong according to what you consider postmortem root banding.
Well, not just what I consider postmortem root banding, but also the 2 of them. I mean, once they did initial analysis and discussions, they excluded those hairs.
Okay, let me take this step by step. There's examiner A and examiner B, correct? And these are people who are just as qualified as you are.
Yes, that's correct.
They have the same training you go through.
That's correct.
And they have the same amount of experience as you do.
No.
More?
Less.
Less? Okay. And why did you choose someone for your study with less experience?
They were 2 examiners that were not involved in my initial analysis of these hairs.
Okay.
So
and they have observed the same characteristics in other hairs.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
They have, examiner A and examiner B have both seen apparent decomposition in hairs. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they've also seen what is called postmortem root banding in hairs.
Yes.
So when examiner A inspected a hair and found postmortem root banding, his opinion from that inspection is different from what you would say is postmortem root banding.
In that initial analysis, that's correct.
Okay. And when examiner B did the examination and found postmortem root banding, his opinion is different than what your opinion would be.
Correct. In that initial analysis, that's correct.
Okay. Now, this is still a very ongoing area of forensic science, is it not?
There's still research being done. I mean, I'm conducting research myself. It's pretty well established discipline, but it's mostly, for the most part, based on the experience of hair examiners and observing hairs known to be from deceased individuals, hairs known to be from living individuals, and noticing these differences.
Now, you've never testified in a court of law about postmortem root banding, have you, sir?
I have not.
Okay. And this is your very first time in the United States testifying to such a thing?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you, after you submitted a deposition in this case, correct?
I did.
I was present?
Yes.
And Mr. Ashton was present?
Yes.
And this occurred in Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Okay. And subsequent to us taking your deposition, you submitted for an approval of a validation study of postmortem root banding, did you not?
That's correct.
And in that submission, you requested approval for this project to be expedited.
Yes, that's right.
And that is in order for it to be complete before trial.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And this was subsequent to you giving your opinion in this case.
It was after the deposition.
Yes. And after also reports that you've submitted in this case.
Yes, that's correct.
So to sum it up, you wrote your report, correct? Is that
Correct.
a yes?
Correct.
You have to say yes for the court report.
Sure.
And you testified under oath,
Correct.
and then you did a validation study for postmortem root banding.
That's correct. The postmortem root banding was already what I would consider valid. It was based primarily on experience. Not a lot of research studies have gone into studying the effects of environmental hairs on antemortem. So that's why I did look into that, especially after coming across the thesis from John Jay College.
And a huge part of that, what's established, is that you cannot say postmortem root banding comes from a dead person.
That's correct.
And from what you observed, even in your own study, after you gave your opinions in this case, was that subjecting hairs to different environments can alter the appearance of a hair to include darkening on the hair, correct?
You can get darkening on the hair, yes.
To the point where even a trained forensic examiner would call it postmortem root banding.
That's what occurred in their initial analysis, correct.
Now, again, what you received in this case was only one hair.
I'm sorry.
From, the Q12 and what was given to you initially was only one hair.
Correct.
And in your experience, human beings shed many hairs all the time.
Yes, they do shed. We shed on average around 100 hairs per day. Most of the hairs, though, that are shed are naturally shed hairs that have a club-like appearance to them.
And then sometimes someone brushes their hair or something happens and someone's hair will stick on some clothing, right?
Correct.
Okay. And one of the reasons you have a job is because hairs are found everywhere at scenes, correct?
Yes, correct.
In fact, it's one of the most frequent things that are left at a scene.
We see hairs at scenes all the time.
And a lot of these hairs aren't coming off of someone pulling hair or brushing their hair or anything like that. There are things called transfer, correct?
Correct.
And when we say transfer, we're referring to, I have some contact with you. Somehow your hair ends up on my jacket sleeve, and I could transfer it somewhere else, correct?
Correct. That's called an indirect transfer.
Okay. And also called secondary transfer.
Yes.
Okay. Other transfer would be my own hair is on me somehow, somewhere, and I come into contact with something, and that sheds a hair.
Yes, that's correct.
Correct. And the likelihood of transfer, or saying if you only find one hair, that is consistent with transfer, is it not?
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
If I have one hair that I leave at a crime scene, and that hair is there, doesn't necessarily mean the person was there, does it?
That's correct. I can't tell how that hair got to that location.
And the fact that you would find one hair at a scene and not a bunch of hairs, that is consistent with transfer, is it not, sir?
I'm sorry, can you clarify
Sure.
that?
No, I'll rephrase the question, no problem. If you find multiple hairs, numerous hairs, that's not as consistent with transfer as much as if you only find one hair, correct?
Well, finding any hairs separate from a person's scalp would be a transfer.
It would be consistent with transfer, correct?
Finding any hairs in a location other than the person's scalp would indicate a transfer occurred.
And the likelihood is even increased more so if you only find one hair, correct?
No, it's a transfer whether it's one hair or many hairs.
What I mean, sir, is rather than the actual person being at that location, that's what I'm referring to. I know that they're all considered transfer, but generally speaking, as opposed to the person actually being at that location, it is more consistent with transfer if you just find one hair. Wouldn't you agree?
So direct transfer.
Correct.
It may indicate that. I mean, again, we don't know, even from a single hair, how it got to that location, whether it was directly transferred, meaning it went directly from the source to that location, or indirectly transferred, meaning it went to another intermediate object and then to that case, and then to that location.
And to conclude on your study, the environmental conditions were completely different from your study than, they weren't done in Florida, were they?
No, they were not.
Where were they done, sir?
They were conducted around Quantico, Virginia.
Okay. What time of the year?
Between the months of August and April.
Get pretty cold up there during those months?
It does.
And of course, climate and heat is the biggest factor that speeds up the decomposition process, does it not?
That's my understanding.
Heat plays a major role in decomposition, does it not, sir?
My understanding is that heat can increase the rate of decomposition, but that's really not my area of expertise.
Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
Just a couple of questions, sir. The brush-like appearance that counsel asked you about that distinguished the Q59 hairs found at the scene of the body and the Q12 hair from the trunk, is that an indicator of more advanced decomposition?
Yes, the hair mass and the brush-like appearance is an indicator of further decomposition.
The two hairs that Mr. Baez spent some time speaking to you about that initial examiners included as banding and then excluded, what were the environmental conditions under which those two hairs were maintained?
They were both submerged in water for approximately 17 days.
So neither one of those hairs was in the trunk of a car?
That's correct.
The Q12 hair that counsel was asking you about, he talked about shed hairs. Was Q12 a shed hair?
No, Q12 was an anagen or stretched root hair, which would indicate some force was required to remove that hair.
In all of, and counsel correctly pointed out that you see hairs all the time from crime scenes, correct?
Yes.
Over your career, would it be a fair statement that you've seen thousands of hairs?
That's fair, yes.
Aside from this particular case, the Q12 hair, have you ever seen a hair with the decomp band that didn't come from a corpse?
No, I have not.
No further questions.
Recrosses to those issues and those issues alone.
And that last question that Mr. Ashton asked you, you've only this is the first time you've testified about this topic, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And are you aware of the thesis that was conducted that you based this study on, the underlying conclusion?
I've read it. I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Are you aware of the conclusion that?
Objection, hearsay, non-authoritative. Project, explain more.
You may. You may proceed, Mr. Baez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Shaw, just two quick points that I'd like to touch upon. Based on your studies and experience, it is true that environmental effects could cause confusion in identifying or misidentifying postmortem root bandings, correct?
Without proper training, there is that possibility.
Okay. Now, when you testified about the type of root on the Q12 hair, and you said that some force would have had to been used, that doesn't mean that someone pulled that hair out, correct?
Not necessarily, no.
In fact, it could have come out through a brush.
It could have.
Yes. And numerous other ways as well, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Yes, sir.
Would moving a dead body be one of those ways that the hair could have been pulled out?
It could, yes.
No further questions.
May the witness be excused.